だから私もいつかアメリカで生活してみたくて、グリーンカードの取得ができないか調べてますの。
Wants to live in the United States for a while. We know what a green card is, but Shinada probably doesn't. What's so great about America is a nice goal. You know what? I'm curious. What's so great about America?
日本みたいに時間に追われていないのがいいですわ。どなたも仕事よりプライベートを大事にしますし。
Oof. Yeah, it probably might seem like that from a perspective of a Japanese person. Huh. These are the stuff that I'm looking forward to in the 8th installment in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. I'm looking forward to these things, like the perspective of the writers and the creators characterizing Japanese characters, looking from the outside in on not really the American culture at large, but probably all we know is the Hawaiian perspective. But maybe they'll shock and awe and have something else. But yeah, they're not pressed for time. That is I'm gonna offer a little bit of a hot take here. That is a very 10-year-old. I can see it from 10 years ago. Like even how long has it been now? Even 14 years ago, when I studied abroad in New Zealand, that was their perspective about Americans. Like, oh man, we thought like when they the comment that happens when you go and study abroad, like you go to university and you're a university student from the United States and you go there, the first culture shock that comes to, at least on the American side, is that other universities are not pressed for time and they have very low standards to pass. And when I mean by low standards, I don't mean the people are low standards. There's a very low standard of requirement. The bottom line is, and they are far less career oriented than the United States. Now, this person is referring to maybe Americans in general. So I don't belong, I guess, to sort of speak in a way like I can't represent what she's talking about because I'm multicultural and I'm also part of the quote unquote higher education group, and the higher education group is underrepresenting. It's a smaller percentage of the population. But in my group, the standards of working and personal life is comparable, if not exceeds, most other places. Like, it's to the point where the most miserable people in the United States, if I had to make a contest, the most miserable people are those people that belong to the group that I am. Like, they are constantly pressed for time. It's very difficult to get any semblance of personal life over work because the demand on them are incredible. I would agree that that's probably offset by the vast majority of people who do have these values. But knowing Japan, right, I would say no, Japan might still be one step higher than that. Like, it's still higher. So to a Japanese person, I totally agree with this. But to any other place, the impression is often that Americans are laid back. And shockingly enough, I actually think there are a lot of countries, especially ironically countries outside that are in the Western side of things, like Western culture, a lot of Western culture societies that think the United States is laid back. Meanwhile, ironically, or maybe paradoxically, they would criticize the United States for like not appreciating their workforce, working long hours, being paid less, overpaying for things, cost of living's too high, lots of taxation. What does that spell? This. So it's actually really it's one of those misconceptions that it's easier to make it in the United States. I would say yes, probably to a Japanese person, but like she's on the mark in Japan, relatively speaking. But it's if you want to live paycheck to paycheck and always strapping for cash, and like all the stories in the hostess stories, like teenagers working at home, juggling home, going on education because their parents are not well to do, that is more of the social norm. So for her, she's 24 in 2013. If she goes to the United States, she's probably going to encounter the same situation where she's going to be pressed for time, no semblance of personal life because work is required for her to maintain her lifestyle. Like, so that's kind of the really unfortunate, realistic take on it. It's one of those things that personally I would love to beg to differ. Like for me, as someone who maybe has it a little better than average, I wish this was the case. I actually really do wish this was the case. Like if someone's suffering, like it's hard in their country, like, hey, come over to the United States. We're very laid back and, we have plenty of time to help other people succeed and all that. That's great. That's not even a negative thing. Like that's a great compliment, in my opinion. If there was a country where you're not pressed for time and that you have plenty of time to value your personal life over your work, like it would be great. But generally speaking, if you're looking at a developed country and you're moving from a developed country, most developed countries statistically and psychologically have the same issues. Yeah, but the thing is, Greece, I want to say as humbly as possible, Greece does not have a globalized economy that represents the gold standard of the globe, right? So Japan would not be in the same conversation as Greece, and the United States would not be in the, but it's great though. I think like if you're going to go somewhere, if you're successful and you have a lot of resources, going to another place that has a laid back type of culture, yeah, like if you made it, like she's going because she's not successful yet, right? So if you're going from a heavy developed country to another heavy developed country, the reality is whatever your situation is there is going to be similar there. Only now she piled on another mess of stuff. Learning the language, learning the culture, learning the infrastructure. So she's going to pile all that on to everything that she has existing. So it's rough. Generally speaking, if you're semi-successful and you move to a country that is, I want to say, have lower standards, as in like not lower standards as in everyone is worse. It's the cutoff, like the resource and stuff and demands are lower. You would more likely succeed in that situation because you already have a training edge to normalize it. So like for example, I'll use my life as an example. My parents' work ethic that was conditioned in China is beyond the standards of the time when they moved over here. So it gave them a working edge to cut a segment to capitalize on the system. So they financially succeeded because they had a skill that was giving them an advantage. If you're already struggling in a system, you hope to bring and go to a system that the thing that works still works even better. But generally speaking, in like 2013 years, it's one of those things that I want to say really lightly. The American dream is a really wonderful concept. It's a very idealized concept that I wish was true. Like, as an American who see lots of underprivileged things happening in other countries and stuff, it would be wonderful to live in a country that you could say, hey, come here and opportunities exist. And you could say, now it's more like you can say opportunities exist, but are you going to attain them? Not all the time. Like, the whole idea is like, it'd be great. There was at one point, I would say, it's probably easier, like before my time, like before I was born, maybe more than 30 or 40 years back, there might have been a time that you could say, yeah, the United States have higher opportunities. Like, without a doubt, like no argument. You go to the United States because, you know, they're too laid back and like there's so many things you can do. It's like, yeah, I want that. But it's not true anymore. It's like that you still have to do your thing, learn all the stuff. You get outcompeted all the time. You get crushed under competition. So if it's already rough for you in a country that's well developed, it's probably going to continue that. But yeah, and then the layback countries, right? You have to, like, the countries that are truly laid back have to give up something for that laybackness, which is often economically and globally. So the global appeal and economics tend to be the one that is a much greater tell of the work culture of a country. And if you're not one of the top economic countries, you may have a culture that can support being laid back, I would say. But generally speaking, it's not great if you don't have money in like economically strong countries. And it's tough. And I would say Japan could say the same for themselves. So it's 2013, right? And this game series did go through the Japanese economic boom. It was Yakuza 0. Yakuza 0, you could say the same for Japan back in the 1990s-ish. And the United States went through an economic boom too. Probably a little bit like arguably probably post Great Depression would be anytime post Great Depression or way earlier before the Great Depression. I would say would be the time when that whole American dream and stuff was a reality. But yeah, it's great. I mean, if that's what the perception is, I wouldn't argue against that perception that she has here. It's just, as an American, I kind of wish it was true, but it really, unfortunately, isn't. At least not now, of all times. Or not in 2013. I mean, I was alive in 2013. What was I doing in I was starting graduate school in 2013. And when I started graduate school, scientific research was on the decline. Like in terms of like it was going on a downward spiral when it came to funding. And then things got harder from there. That was 2013.
土地も広く伸び伸び
American
してい
debt
るから
was, you know,
生活にゆとりがある気がする
really
ん
high.
ですの
Plus, it's also big and vast. That won't change. I like that. You cannot argue with that at all. That's literally true. So it's big and fast. There's no denying that. I feel like there really be room to live, you know? It is fair. How you live is another different how you're able to live, or maybe ideally live the way you want. Probably not. But there's definitely room to live. Like the literal space to live. Because we have to keep in mind, she's comparing it to Japan. Japan has an incredible density per space. I mean, and what I mean by density, I mean structure to density, not people to density. Because Japan's population is actually not thriving. It's not on the uptrend. So you can't necessarily equate density as in people per surface area if you're comparing two countries where one country population is increasing and another country's population is stagnating over many years. But in terms of like literal space, yeah, like anything, I would say for a Japanese person, there are probably a greater number of countries that appear to be far more spacious, as in there's land, literal land, as opposed like bigger things to explore. It's not to say that Japan doesn't have anything to explore. I want to go to Japan and explore Japan. It's just Japan is relatively and literally a smaller country than the United States. So it would naturally have more opportunities to explore.
なるほど。
Do you though, Shinada? Do you wish you could live like that? I mean, he is broke, so...
そういえばさ、
So how do you go about getting one of these green cards? Yeah, that's not easy actually. Getting a green card? I mean, there are ways that you might consider it easy up front. But let's just say that is probably, that doesn't work out, even that might work out even worse than cutting it out on your own, like doing it out on your own kind of thing.
一番手っ取り早いのはアメリカ人の男性と結婚することかしら。
There it is.
私の母も日本人の父と結婚して日本の永住権を取得しましたし。
That's it. That would be the fastest way. I'm glad they translated it to the fastest way. It's not the easiest way. It is the fastest way.
なあ、
Oh right, you're half Japanese. Yeah, because we know that she has foreign relatives.
あとは抽選に応募するという手もありますけど、年1回しか抽選がない上に、
Oh yeah, that's
何
right.
千人に1人しか当たらないらしいんですの。
I forgot that was a thing. The lottery. I don't even know how that works, and like I don't even know how that works. Yeah. Why not get married then? Yeah,
それじゃあ、
sure. It sounds like the most expedient route.
結婚相手をそんな簡単に決められませんわ。いいお相手かど
There
う
you
か
go.
しっかり見極めてからじゃないと結婚なんてとても。
Yep, that's it. Yeah, a lot of times she basically highlighted what I was alluding to. It is not the easiest route, it is the fastest route. And often that ends up being, I would argue, probably even less consistently well than acquiring it independently. And acquiring it independently is not to say the hardest way to do it, but it is a very, very long process. And it comes with all its fair share of problems or difficulty. I wouldn't call them problems. It's just very difficult. For someone who's coming to a country with no, like, just even if it's very difficult for incredibly educated people to independently acquire citizenship, one can only imagine how difficult it would be for a 24-year-old who is potentially semi-educated but not educated for the country she's going to immigrate to. I hear ya. When it comes to foreigners, their culture is totally different too. Yeah, that's the fairest thing. Maybe just taking a trip would be better than a long-term residency? Oh yeah, she's only still talking about like visiting.
そうね。やっぱり理想は日本とアメリカ両方に家を持って行き来することかしら。
That is a very privileged life that she's looking for, that she's talking about. That's ideal.
おいおい
Wow, aim a little higher there, why don't you? Exactly. That's a really lofty lofty. I would love it too. Like I would love to interact, have the luxury to interact with Japanese people.